Hello and welcome to my more in-depth video of mmManipCycle. Thanks to Stephen from Loopin House for putting out a great video introducing the script. He covers installation and using the functions in their default mode. You can find a link to his video in the description below. In this video I'm going to be going into more detail on how you can customize the functions to better suit your workflow and your preferences, and also cover one or two use case scenarios for when you might use a tool like this in your day-to-day work. If you would like to skip any specific sections, you can use the timestamps on screen now, or the chapters available in your current player. So I initially wrote this script very early in my career to save time switching manipulator spaces. I felt like it was something I was doing frequently enough that a script would prove useful to slightly speed it up. Since then, this script has grown to add more flexibility, customizability, so I can pass it on to other animators who might find it useful. I am aware that similar scripts to this exist elsewhere, and this is only natural considering this is quite a basic Maya function that I'm streamlining. This is just the tool I have written and use in my day-to-day work, so it's free for you to use and modify just as you see fit. So let's get started. Once you have downloaded mmManipCycle and unzipped the file, you'll find 4 files within the folder. The 2 main ones are our Python file and our text document. The PNGs are for if you want to use this as a shelf button. To install the Python file, we're going to head to our Maya directory. For example, mine is in Documents. For the script, we're going to go to our Scripts folder and copy the Python file into the Scripts folder. And then if you want to do the icons, if you're going to use them, you can head to the year of your Maya version, head to Prefs, Icons, and then grab the 2, copy and paste them in. Now we're ready to boot up Maya and get it working in there. And now we're in Maya. To add this script as a hotkey, we'll head to Windows, Settings, Preferences, and Hotkey Editor. We're going to go to Custom Scripts, so we can add our new one and move from keyboard to Runtime Command Editor. This is where you're going to want to head back to the folder you downloaded to get the README file, because that's where we're going to grab our 2 lines of script that run the 2 different functions. This one runs the space function and this one runs the axis function. So we're going to make 2 hotkeys for that. We're going to hit new, set it to Python, give it a name. So this one we're going to call it mmManip space, and we're going to head to our text document and copy, paste. We're going to save, and now that's ready. Next one, we're going to do the same for axis, mmManipAxis. It's set to Python automatically because the last one was. We're going to head back to our text document and copy paste the axis version. We're going to save that runtime command. Now we have our 2 scripts. You can now set them as a hotkey. So for space, I'm going to use V, and for axis, I'm going to use Shift V. Now we're good to go as a hotkey. If you want to use the script as a button in a custom shelf, if you have your command line available in your workspace, you can do that. Otherwise, you can head to the script editor. Similarly, we're going to switch this to Python. We're going to return to our text document, and for the spaces, we're going to copy, going to paste that into here, Control A, middle mouse click, up to the shelf, and call it Python. And then we're going to do the same for the second one. We're going to go into here, going to copy, we're going to paste, Control A, middle mouse drag, set that to Python. First one, we can edit it. Notice it's the space. And we're going to grab our icon, which should now be on our icons folder. Here it is, icon. We're going to save that. And we'll do the same to the next one. This time using the axis icon. And that's it, we have the script installed. So let's go through how we would use this script. Normally, if you wanted to change the space or orientation of a manipulator, you would either hold W and left click, and you could change it through here, or you would do Control Shift and right click, or you would head to your tool settings and change it through here. Instead, with the script, we can just use our new hotkey, which I've set to V, to cycle through the different spaces. you'll see if you have your command line down here, it will print what you have just switched to. So as I hit V, I'm cycling through my spaces, and we can see I've got a little icon, a little reminder here for where our world is. If I get into world, this now lines up with where our world is. Now this is our object, since it is rotated with the body, and this is our parent, because we are now following the global control for the character. And then using axis mode, instead of clicking the manipulator you want and dragging it, or middle mouse dragging it if you are not near it, you can just use Shift V, and now we'll cycle between them. Again, we'll be having the one we have moved to printed down in the bottom. So I can move to that, and middle mouse click to move that around. And of course a double press of that tool button, such as W there, will reset that to center. So how would we use these scripts in a real world setting, in a day-to-day job? Well, as you can see, I've got a little scene set up here using Josh Sobel's mmMech rig. We're going to head to our camera that's been set up, and as you can see, the camera is aligned with world. This means if we switch our space to world, now our X lines up with the X of the camera. But if we've got our character walking through the shot like this, and they're walking at a specific angle, we might want to head to parent space, so that now, if we double check in perspective, our blue axis is the direction the character will be walking. So we could grab all the feet controls and we could move them in that space, and it will follow their parent control. And similarly, you might need it in object space for whatever reason if you wanted to move them in this way. Now the axis switcher function of the script can be useful if you don't want to leave your camera. Let's say your workflow revolves around mainly staying in the camera and you need to select an axis which isn't available to you. So let's say this waist, the character is actually walking like this. If we turn them at a certain angle, suddenly when we return to our world, the red axis, our x-axis, is no longer visible. However, we can use our Shift-V hotkey, our axis space switcher, to toggle between the three axes. You see now our X has been selected, and I can middle mouse, and now I'm controlling the axis that I wouldn't have been able to grab unless I went out into perspective view, grab the X, and return to my camera. This eliminates that. This might seem like a very minor time save, since all you need to do normally is hold W and switch to the space. But I found by having it on a hotkey, such as the space switcher or even the axis, I'm navigating around my manipulator so much quicker, because if I'm working through my camera, I don't want to be losing my focus and doing all this. I can just hit a button and I'm already using the manipulator in the right space. Now we're going to cover the customizability that's been included in these two functions. As you might have seen earlier, when cycling through using the default mode, we go through parent, world, and object. If you wanted to change this, so for example, I often use this only cycling through world and object, there is a variable made available to us which we can use to change it however we'd like. We can move through any number of the available spaces and in any order. For this case, I'm going to use the buttons since they are easier to edit, but this will be the exact same as your script editor. If we head to our documentation, to the README that was provided, we'll see the defaults here that are used when we just paste in these scripts, but there's a section here called Changing Cycled Space or Axis, and you'll see for both space and axis, translate, rotate, and scale are all available to us as variables for us to modify the spaces we cycle through. And this is done using square brackets, quotation marks, and commas. The square brackets to dictate that it's a list, the comma to separate the item, and the brackets to give the name of the space. If you need a reminder of what the script takes, they are down here, down for translate, rotate, and scale. These are based off the Maya documentation, so they should be very similar apart from maybe one or two differences, such as rotation axis might have a slightly longer name. But otherwise, this matches the Maya documentation. So let's use this one as an example. Here we've got translation and rotation, both set to only cycle through world and object. So let's do that here. We're going to head to our space brackets. we're going to put in translate equals open square brackets, and I'm going to cycle between world and object. And then similarly for rotate, I'm going to open the square brackets and do world and object. Now, if I close this and run the script, you'll see we only cycle between object and world. Of course, we can still use our W menu to head into component space if we wanted to use that, but every time we run the script, it will take the first in the list and return to that. So in this case, it's world. So even if I am in parent space, using the hotkey will now return it to world, and once I'm in world, it will continue to hop between object and world. That's because the first in our list is the default. You might have noticed in the documentation I used an example for scale. Let's say we'd only ever really use world space for scale. So we're going to go scale equals square brackets, world, close square brackets. So you notice even when we switch to object space and we run our script, it will return us back to world, no matter which one we use. So that can also be another handy way to use this script. So you could have multiple hotkeys, some which always return the manipulator to world, or some that cycle between a variety of spaces. Similarly, the axis cycle function can also be modified to cycle through whichever axes you would like. So let's double check our README. And you'll see here, we can still use the translate, scale, and rotate are available to us, and we can list X, Y, Z, and also center, which is our middle grabber here. So we can list those individually to translate or scale, but we also have a new variable available just in axis mode, which is all. Because you're more likely between translate, rotate, and scale to always want to cycle through the same axes, we're going to use all instead. And in this case, with the square brackets again, I'm going to cycle only between the center and Y. So I'm going to make center the default by putting it first, and then I'm going to do Y and close the square brackets. This means now when I use the axis switcher in the button here, which has the new variable, I'm always toggling between the center grabber and through Y, because maybe I'm doing a lot of movement and I always want to be returning to the Y for an up down, let's say in the walk. And of course, if we have another axis selected, using the hotkey will return us to the center, since we set that as our default. And that's the advanced guide on how to use mmManipCycle. To recap, we've added our script as a hotkey or as a button, and we've used the functions available, translate, rotate, scale, and in the case of the axis function, all, to modify the script to our liking to cycle through any number of the spaces and in any order, using the first listed item as our default if none in the list are currently being used. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video, and happy animating!